It was really through singing as a boy from the age of about 7 or 8 that I got into reading music and doing music in a sort of collective way. And then I started the flute, I guess, when I was about 8 and never looked back.
Did you know that the flute was always going to be your instrument, or did you said that, you trained in voice as well. Did you have plans maybe to be an opera star or a singer? Or...
Certainly not, no. I did know from the very first time I blew a head joint that the flute was my instrument. And I have no idea why. Just had a very, very strong feeling about it. It was, to me, it was almost like magic that you would get a sound by blowing across something rather than into it.
Because it's uninterrupted air, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. There's a freedom to it somehow. So I was just very excited the minute I picked one up. And it was just kind of chance, really. There was as it always is, when people take up an instrument, what are the chances of them discovering the right instrument for themselves? But there was an older boy at my school. He seemed very old, but he was probably about 11. He let me have a go on his flute and just got hooked from that moment on.
Yeah. I mean, so you started learning at the age of 8. Was that, because you needed to let, your teeth develop, or do you want to learn it younger? Or
well, I'd had a little bit of a setback because I was taken to a teacher who told me that I'd have to wait until my teeth were more developed.
Exactly.
And so I was not very happy about that at all. I think in the end, I started with a teacher at my school who was actually primarily a clarinetist. So he taught me for probably the first year or so, but then he taught me everything he could do. So I moved on to a flute teacher.
Okay.
But the odd thing was that I was rather furious with the lady who told me I couldn't start straight away. But the very strange thing is that I now own the flute that used to belong to her.
Wow.
So it was my strange kind of revenge.
Amazing. Yeah. So where did you train, and what was the experience of training like?
At Harrow School, which was in those days not particularly musical school. I had my lessons outside at the junior department of the Royal Academy of Music with a man called Derek Honor.
Was it a very sporty school at the time?
It was a very sporty
really
school.
Sporty.
Yeah, absolutely. It was, yeah. And I did a bit of sport as well, but music wasn't so high on the agenda. I think nowadays it's probably much more artistic.
Yeah.
And I was also a member of the National Youth Orchestra in my teens, so that was an incredible privilege. I'll never forget the first rehearsal of National Youth Orchestra being with these 100 other sort of like-minded children. So I was in the NYO, and then when I left school, I went and studied in Paris for a year. I had a sort of year off before going up to university. I was a part-time au pair and part-time busker and having flute lessons in Paris with this amazing sort of grand old man of the flute called Gaston Crunel, who is a name as a flute player you may recognise. He was the dedicatee of such pieces as Messiaen, Le Merle Noir, the Dutier Sonatine, and he'd worked with Ravel, and he was the most extraordinary link with the past. And so I had lessons with him for a year, which was wonderful.
Yeah, it must have been so amazing to be immersed in that, French
in that culture,
sound,
yes,
isn't it?
Exactly. When it's such an important part of the flute repertoire,
wasn't it?
Yes. The only problem was that he chain smoked Gauloise cigarettes, so his apartment was always permanently bathed in blue smoke. Anyway, it doesn't seem to have done me any permanent damage, and he was well into his 80s when I was having lessons with him. So that was a very formative time. And then I went on to Clare College, Cambridge, where singing, since my voice had broken a few years earlier, I'd kind of stopped singing as a slightly sort of traumatic thing, not having that tone of voice. And then I rediscovered singing when I joined the choir at Clare College, Cambridge. And I was lucky enough to have Timothy Brown, who was the director of music, John Rutter as well, and Roger Norrington. They all had association with the choir. So it was... At that point, I was sort of really much drawn back into the world of singing. I sort of toyed with the idea of a sort of dual career at that point.
Yeah. So did you have singing lessons on the side as well?
I had some singing lessons, but it was really just the choir was it was a big commitment. We did sort of 2 or 3 services a week, and it was a very intensive thing. And I think it's the most amazing training for orchestral playing, being in a choir. I think any orchestral player should join a choir. So just to finish what you were saying about the training, my training sort of went on. I was a kind of eternal student. So I had flute lessons whilst I was at Cambridge with Peter Lloyd, who was the great first flute player in the LSO in those days. And then I went on the Royal Academy of Music to William Bennett for a year of study there, which was, sort of defining thing.
Yes.
It's really stayed with me. And I think about what he said and about his sound every day. He's just died this year, unfortunately.
Oh, really?
But
I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yes, just died a couple of months ago. But he was a great influence on me.
He was teaching right up until the end, wasn't he? I mean,
Absolutely,
he was still going, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was going off to Japan. And he was absolutely passionate about it. And I then did some further study in America with Geoffrey Gilbert, who was William Bennett's teacher. Quite a sort of eclectic mix of influences, I would say.
I want to come back to the singing thing, because obviously, as you know, there's a lot of transference between flute playing and singing. Did you find that it was quite a natural thing for you?
Very much so. I mean, it's using your lungs as kind of the bow, as it were. So it's very, very similar. And, if I'm having trouble playing a phrase on the flute because it goes across a break, or because the fingering is awkward, or because the register is awkward, I always try and just sing the phrase to get the purest possible shape, irrespective of technical consideration. So singing is always my sort of fallback for how to play a particular bit. So the parallels are endless. And in fact, there's a piece that I love playing, which is George Crumb's Voice of the Whale, which I recorded. And it's one of my absolute favourite pieces. And it combines singing and flute playing. As you probably know. You've heard
that was
so you really have to learn this weird technique of engaging your vocal cords and your embouchure at the same time. And it's the most extraordinary effect. It's supposed to evoke the depth of the ocean. So it's extraordinary piece.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you, I mean, coming back to that particular piece, the Song of the Whale, what were
Voice of the Whale.
Voice of the Whale, sorry. Yeah. Were there any particular challenges when it came to, the extended techniques of flute playing and the singing? Because you said it's a fine balance, isn't it, between the vocals and then...
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it just took a bit of experimentation, really. I mean, nearly always the voice would sort of take over, but it's trying to keep the sound going. It's like learning to do circular breathing, where you're blowing out as well as breathing in through your nose. I've not mastered it, but it's a similar sort of thing of having to sort of do two things at once, like rubbing your stomach and you're patting your head at the same time. But it came fairly quickly, I would say. But there are a lot of other challenges in that piece. There's all the extraordinary effects, which are very simply achieved. Like there's the effect in the cello of the seagulls, which is made with the harmonics. And just understanding the notation. His music it's beautiful on the page, but it takes just a bit of deciphering. And actually,
I had a look at the score, and it's just mental.
It is, but if you just sort of look at it.
You just break it down, exactly.
It makes total sense.
I feel that piece it's as much as a performance piece as it is, a piece of music, isn't it?
Absolutely, yes, because it's performed under blue lighting to evoke the deep sea.
Yes.
And with the players wearing masks. And the idea of that is to efface the sense of human projection. So it's just the animal kingdom.
So you just
the impersonal,
on the sound. Yeah.
He calls it the powerful impersonal forces of nature. And I do urge anyone listening to this to check out the piece, because it is, and anyone who's sort of afraid of contemporary music, it's the most accessible and an amazing piece. And I remember the first time I heard it, I was absolutely just had this visceral reaction of just bursting into tears because it was so beautiful and had such a powerful sort of emotional pull to it. And it was actually a student of mine was playing it in a recital with all the lighting and the masks and everything. Yes. And it sounds gimmicky, but it actually has the most incredible emotional power.
Yeah.
So I try to program it whenever I can, although it's quite a production with all the lighting and all those other things. But,
I can imagine.
I did get to do it in the Wigmore Hall once, which was a great thrill.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
How do people respond when you play it?
Well, and people are always surprised when they see the name George Crumb. They're expecting something totally sort of wacky and perhaps dissonant, and
like
it's not.
Sink falling down.
No, exactly. But I think they're always quite pleasantly surprised. Although I did once have a performance where there was a sort of a retired colonel sitting on the front row who'd obviously was coming expecting to hear, more sort of traditional fare.
Yes.
And when we'd started with this cataclysmic sort of sound on the amplified voice and flute.
Yes.
I heard this, oh my God, coming from the front row. But then at the end, he was clapping very enthusiastically. So I think it's a piece that sort of draws people into its own peculiar world. But certainly I've had very good response to it.
Wonderful, wonderful. Let's come on to, well, I thought it was really interesting just watching some of your solo performances, because many people will have seen you on the TV and the orchestra doing the proms, but it was interesting seeing, you know, the videos that you'd put out, because I feel that would it be fair to say you really relish the performance aspect? You know, you really you go for the emotion, don't you?
Totally, yeah. I mean, that's what playing music is about. Yeah. It's about emotion and communicating your passion for a particular piece of music.
Yeah, but you kind of you move as well. Well, you've
got to. I don't get a chance to move very much sitting in the orchestra. You have
no, of course not.
Keep a certain sort of low
very
profile.
Rigid,
so it's quite liberating. I love actually playing solo and doing chamber music and sort of being the conductor, as it were, because you can be sort of more free with your body. Yes, I mean, the videos that I've chosen to record so far are all pieces that are very close to my heart.
Yeah, that comes through so much,
Great, I'm really pleased about that. And I think also performing from memory is something that is very liberating, because you're not stuck looking at the same patterns of music. It just becomes this sort of pure shapes in your mind that you can constantly reinvent.
You're not focused on the notes and looking at the music. It gives the music space to breathe, doesn't it?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Why don't we talk about, you know, one of those particular pieces, which is that fabulous Romeo and Juliet arrangement?
Oh, you've heard that? Good.
It's wonderful. Good. Yeah. So you've done
so pleased.
2 versions, haven't you? You did one for flute and then you did one for oboe.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. This was a kind of lockdown project. Both Emily, my wife, and I were, you know, as all musicians and everybody was, suffering from not making music during those pandemic years. And we'd done a lot of homeschooling and we really needed a project. So we decided both to record and set up YouTube channels. And I had a long ambition to transcribe one of my absolutely favourite pieces, Prokofiev's Romeo and Juliet, for flute and piano. And it was wonderful just to actually, you know, the world stopped. So I was able to kind of indulge in doing this long-held ambition. So I started off with the idea of making a sort of amalgam of the orchestral flute part and Prokofiev's solo piano score for the ballet, and also his 10 pieces from Romeo and Juliet for solo piano, which was actually the way that music was first heard, because there was certain difficulties with the premiere of the piece. So lots of people heard that music for the first time in a solo piano version. So I've used that as the kind of basis for my arrangement. In the process of doing this arrangement, Emily, my oboist wife, heard all these great tunes. So actually, could you do one for me? There are lots of great oboe tunes as well. So I slightly adapted the material I had for the flute one and added a couple of different numbers and ended up with 2 versions, which I think have totally different endings, but I think work equally well. And the sort of starting point for the whole thing was, you know, there's a very well-known violin arrangement of the piece, there's also a viola arrangement as well. So a lot of people have sort of had a go at it. And those arrangements are great, but they concentrate very much on the sort of virtuoso side of the music. And they finish with the death of Tybalt. Which is that very fiery thing. And I wanted to do something that would reflect the whole arc of the story, ending with the death of Juliet and the love potion, as in case of the flute arrangement, which is this very eerie Friar Lawrence music. So my version is a bit longer. It's about, I think it's 8 movements, about 25 minutes. But it was an absolute labour of love. And I was just thrilled to have the opportunity to do it, and also to work with my wonderful pianist, Julian Milford, who just sort of helped to realise that dream for me. And it really was a sort of dream come true to be able to put those pieces into flute form, as it were. So I hope lots of people will play it.
Definitely.
I've had quite a lot of interest in flute players all over the world, but
Yes.
haven't published it yet. So
okay.
I've got to
Got to find a publishing house.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.